Well, I was asked to make a film about the building site initially, and I just knew that I wanted it to be based around people's experience of work. The site is, well, firstly I was overwhelmed by the scale of the site and the really different kind of jobs people were doing there. So I started with interviews with people. So I interviewed about 40 people that worked there, and I guess I knew I was searching for a story. It's like a collage, really, of collecting stories, things I've overheard, and then things that I imagine when I'm somewhere. So I spent a lot of time, as well as interviewing, just being on the site and watching people. And so the story came really slowly over about a year of working on the site, just going every now and again and filming. So the actual process was starting with interviews and photography. So I really wanted to chart the architectural changes as well, so I had to do that from the beginning, and I didn't know the story at the beginning. I just knew that I wanted to film the architecture changing, and I did the interviews with people. Then I had a kind of period of time where I went away from the building site and kind of kept rereading the interviews and deciding what people had told me was interesting, and then I wrote the story in a way that anyone would write a fiction. You know, I can't remember exactly how, but I then created the voiceover. And then I went back and asked the 4 people that I wanted to be in it whether they would. So I'd already interviewed them. So the interview footage you see in the film had already happened at that point. But then I asked them to come back and act out the kind of scenarios that you see unfolding. So, and then we planned a quite conventional kind of shoot, you know, like you would shoot a narrative. So it's kind of half documentary process really, and then a half writing kind of approach.
As the demolition of the old buildings came to an end and the construction work was progressing, I had started to interview people. I was interested in what the word ambition meant to those that moved around me. Was a drive to succeed at work motivated purely by a need for financial stability, personal satisfaction, or more by a desire to be recognised by others?
There isn't a conventional script for that piece in a sense because it's a voiceover. I mean, well, it's because I wanted to put, essentially there's one actor in it, which is the receptionist. So she's the only person that's a cast actress, and she speaks this voiceover and she speaks that to camera, and that's my words. So really she's kind of playing me. So the only script as such is the words that she says. When the other characters are speaking to camera, that's purely documentary, so that's not scripted at all, that's them speaking for real. But when I came to shoot the sections where you see them moving around, that is scripted. I mean, it's storyboarded.
As the building took shape, the designs he had approved emerging into a tangible reality, surrounded by so much potential, his ability to remain upright appeared to suffer. And he said he felt alone in a new way.
I was trying to think about how we relate to other people around us at work, and a lot to do with sort of status and status anxiety, I guess, as well, and how we represent ourselves as a fiction almost to each other at work. It's almost like work becomes a stage, work becomes a theatre, really, where we're playing out our roles, that what's expected of us. And I thought what was interesting about the man that was my central character was that he had a very responsible job. He's kind of head of this massive building site, but on one level he can't cope, and he has, you know, his condition of falling over is, I think, quite psychological. I mean, it's quite kind of linked to stress and anxiety, and there was this way that I really liked the idea that this fictional cure, you know, that if you copied someone, that it could kind of link you in a way that wasn't verbal and that wasn't spoken.
Within the confined space of the lift, he felt a mute yet overwhelming connection to this stranger.
I was really interested in this notion of performance and acting, because they're not actors, they're not trying to act. So their behaviour does look quite forced or unnatural. But again, that to me was kind of important, because it was about the way that when we're in certain environments, we do start to act in quite an unnatural way. I mean, to a certain extent it's manipulation, but I haven't lied to them. I mean, they know what they're doing, they know that it's going to be part of this film, that, you know, So they get paid to do it, you know, there's a contract. But I'm not sure, it's different with each person how much you feel they understand what the finished film will be. So there is a kind of a moment where you're trying to describe to them that it's not going to be a straightforward narrative, it's not a straightforward documentary, and that it's a sort of experiment. So I'm not sure whether they all understand exactly what they're getting involved in, but they all see it at the end and they all can decide if they want, you know, they can say no at the end, and no one did. So that's a real kind of thing that I guess runs through a lot of my work. And I think it's also how to incorporate something to do with the fantastical, or something, how sort of something can punctuate the very normal everyday. So how something kind of quite surreal or a strange, odd moment can be incorporated into what is a really kind of a documentary look at the real world. But then there were certain kind of filmic conventions I was trying to think about as well, to do with establishing wide shots and close-ups to kind of add heightened drama at moments. But also it's, in that film, it's very much how people are framed within architecture. So the positioning of people is often to do with their kind of hierarchical position, or the way that one character will lead to another through the architecture.
That was our last conversation, and as soon as the new buildings opened, tenants beginning to fill the space, he moved.
Initially, I think it's actually just a delight in architecture. I mean, it's this real fascination with the fabric of the world that one moves within. And so you take something like a building site, it's just such a visual kind of feast. And I really was just very interested in how you can chart that with a camera. And you think it might be quite easy in a way. You think, well, I'll do a very wide shot and it's going to look really dramatic. And actually it's really quite complicated once you get the camera there to kind of make it work.
Well, thank you.
I hope that was okay.